It's so nice to see, I would say so many familiar faces, but so many familiar names, and coming together to celebrate Dr. Warrick is always, it's always fun to do. And there's always so many people interested in engaging with Dr. Warrick. And we're here really to learn more about Don's work, but also this is an opportunity to really acknowledge his contribution to the college. There's really only a few times that a college has the opportunity to recognize someone for 50 years of teaching and service to one university. Don has been an integral member of the College of Business team since 1971, and for over 5 decades has made a lasting impact on our students, our campus, and our community. He has spent his career developing and coaching leaders, developing high-performance teams and organizations, and managing organizational development, change, and transformation. He's published 9 books and more than 90 articles, book chapters, and professional papers within his discipline. He's worked with more than 200 Fortune 500 and international companies, mid-sized and small organizations, government agencies, and religious organizations. He also serves as president of the Warrick Agency Training and Development Company. Don has also been celebrated with the highest recognitions in his academic field, including a 2018 Lifetime Achievement Award from the Organizational Development Network Association and the Distinguished Educator Award from the Academy of Management. He's also been named Outstanding Organizational Development Practitioner of the Year, Outstanding Human Resource Professional of the Year, Best Professor in Organizational Development, and the David Bradford McGraw-Hill Educator of the Year. Over the past 5 decades, Don has taught more than 10,000 students in his graduate and undergraduate leadership and organizational development and change classes. In fact, almost every single student in the MBA program has been exposed to his knowledge and philosophies about excellent leadership and building healthy, high-performance organizations. And Don has also been gracious enough to share his insight with me as I came on board about 1.5 years ago. It's so inspiring to see how much of an impact Don has made on his students throughout the years. Students across generations have reached out to share their appreciation for Dr. Warrick, and I've really enjoyed reading their stories on the 50th Kudo board if you haven't had a chance to take a look at that. About 1 year ago, I took on the role of dean, and I've been so impressed by the college's culture and quality of faculty serving our students. Don is a shining example of a faculty member who's been with the college from the start and who has remained committed to building strength in leadership, teaching, and culture throughout the college. This includes the countless students he's taught, the faculty and staff he's collaborated with, and the companies he's consulted. It's a tremendous accomplishment to serve a university and community as Dr. Warrick has throughout the years. And his dedication to education and our students is really inspiring. So with that, I want to turn it over to Dr. Warrick and thank him for his service, his contributions, both professionally and also personally. I'll just share that he and his wife, Anna, have been so gracious in welcoming me to the community. So it's been a pleasure. And with that, Dr. Warrick.
That was an absolutely remarkable introduction, Dean Markell. And by the way, I would say it's a delight to have you here. You're making quite a difference in your own light. And thank you so much for all of you that are attending this seminar. And thank you, Alyssa, and Sammy, for all the work that you put into putting this together. I would like to mention that these webinars are actually sponsored by the endowment that Chancellor Reddy established, called the Warrick Endowment for Excellence in Leadership, Teaching, and Culture. The 3 pillars are what I really am passionate about, and the purpose of this endowment is to encourage these 3 pillars excellence in leadership, teaching, and culture, not only at UCCS, but throughout our community. And so you can actually get involved in this by sending suggestions of what we might do to actually further that goal. Different ways that we might be able to further excellence in leadership, teaching, and culture at UCCS and in the community, and of course your contributions as well. Now, in introducing this seminar, I would like to say that of all the seminars that we're going to be doing, all these webinars, this is the most important. In the future, we're going to do some interesting webinars. We'll be talking about what organizations need to do to successfully manage change in today's times. We'll also be talking about leadership skills, management skills, people skills, team skills, and how to build high performance teams and teamwork. We'll be talking about how you can build organizations for success in today's times, how to manage stress, time in your life, and many other things. So there are going to be a lot of interesting things that we'll be talking about. However, in the end result, everything we do is really a reflection of how we decide to live our life and what we want our life to count for. So committing to excellence is really the key to everything. When this session is over, if I had one person that understood what's being communicated and wanted to commit their life to excellence, I would be thrilled because it will change their life and all the people that they impact. But the fact is, I actually know there will be many more because I know a lot of you that are out there in the audience. I know, for example, my wife, Anna, is already committed to excellence, and I saw Sandy Kramer's name pop up. He has done so much for this university. And frankly, Sandy, you've always been an example of committing to excellence to me personally. So I know it's going to reach a number of people. Now, if you will show the first slide, Sammy. Yes. Here's the purpose: to motivate one, some, or many in the audience to commit to a life of excellence that makes a difference personally, professionally, and in the lives of others. Fact is that we're all making decisions by design or default every day about how we want to live our life and what we want our life to count for. So this session is designed to prepare people to commit to a life of excellence that isn't dependent on circumstances from the past or even the present. It's also designed to motivate people to adopt this concept of committing to excellence because we need people. We desperately need people that have this commitment to excellence that's contagious to the people around them. We live in an imperfect world with imperfect people, with imperfect organizations. And if you and I would look in the mirror, we'd see an imperfect person. And we all need somebody who's a bright light to be around, who's encouraging. So we need people today in this difficult world where people are indeed committed to excellence. Now, if you go to the next slide, Sammy, here's what you're going to learn. Committing to excellence is basically, it's a lifestyle. It's an attitude about life. It's an approach to life that has many benefits to you and, by the way, others as well. Also, you're going to learn what committing to excellence, why it is so important to you and to others and the organizations you serve. We're also going to talk about what committing to excellence is not. This isn't about being perfect. It's not about doing everything well, being a star at what you do. It really is about a way of life that can affect people at high levels, low levels, any stage of life. And I might add, and we'll talk about this, it isn't also about always being on top of everything, feeling great and wonderful. You can commit to excellence, you can hurt, you can feel pain, you can get discouraged. We also will talk about what committing to excellence is, and then finally, how you can actually develop a plan for committing to excellence. Now, here's the bottom line of this webinar, and I'll say it now and I will say it at the end. I'm going to share a lot of information, but it's all going to lead to one conclusion. And here's what this webinar is about. It's learning at the beginning of every day to ask the question, am I willing to be committed to excellence in the way I think, speak, and act? Am I willing to be committed to excellence in the way I think, speak, and act? So everything you learn today is going to go towards that end. Now, go to the next slide about why committing to excellence is so important. First of all, in this changing world, this troubled world, this divided world, we need champions who can be counted on to be committed to excellence and are uplifting to be around. Also, a lot of people don't realize that when you commit to excellence, it makes you a more desirable leader, employee, friend, spouse, father, mother. One of the things that we've learned about good leadership is the best leaders have a passion for excellence that's contagious. But this really applies to all of us. And when you're around somebody like that, it has an impact on you and on others. A true commitment to excellence requires a commitment to quality relationships, not just personal achievements, and it benefits society. So this is important to know. As I'm defining committing to excellence today, it's not just about achievement. Certainly that's a factor, and giving your best at whatever you do, but it's really about building others up and having quality relationships. So when I talk about excellence, there's a balance between achievement and also just bringing out the best in others and yourself. Committing to excellence creates a win-win situation for you and others. There's some really interesting research on this. We've heard growing up, all of us, that it's better to give than to receive. Believe it or not, research indicates that that actually is true. That when you're a person who is looking for ways to bring out the best in others and not just preoccupied with yourself, they win, but you win more. And they found out that the psychological benefits to the giver are even more than the receiver. Those committed to excellence increase the probability of having a happy, productive, and healthy life. This comes predominantly from the research done mostly by Harvard. Others have done it as well, but particularly at Harvard has focused on this whole idea of how you live your life in a way that is a happy, productive, and healthy life. And they found that people that are others oriented and not preoccupied with themselves tend to, on the average, actually live longer, they're healthier, they have more quality relationships, and so on. Next, being committed to excellence provides a higher and more fulfilling purpose than being preoccupied with self. And by the way, this whole preoccupation with self has made people worse off rather than better off. And you know, we hear all this stuff about look out for number one, do your own thing, be your own person. Fact is that the people that have the most fulfilling lives are not preoccupied with self, but they're committed to a higher purpose. And when you live with a sense of purpose, it makes a difference not only in your life, but also in the lives of others. Committing to excellence requires a positive attitude of gratitude, which has many benefits for you and others and how you experience life. And I wanted to mention a study about gratitude actually found in the Wall Street Journal. And it says grateful people are happier, healthier, they live longer. And it says this, it turns out giving thanks is good for your health. A growing body of research suggests that maintaining an attitude of gratitude can improve psychological, emotional, and physical well-being. Adults who frequently feel grateful have more energy, more optimism, more social connections, and more happiness than those who do not, according to studies conducted over the past decade. They're also less likely to be depressed, envious, greedy, or alcoholics. They earn more money, sleep more soundly, exercise more regularly, and have greater resistance to viral infections. So all of this about committing to excellence isn't just sort of a euphemism. It literally makes sense. By the way, in this article, which was really fun to read, they recalled some research done with kids. And they found out that when they could teach grade school kids to have an attitude of gratitude, that those kids performed better in school, they were happier, had better relationships, and so on. So it's very important to have an attitude of gratitude, to have a positive outlook on life, which doesn't mean that you don't accept the realities of life. It just simply means that you have a positive approach to dealing with those issues of life. Now, let's go to the next slide. What committing to excellence is not. This is really important to understand. I'm not really trying to motivate people to try to lead this perfect kind of life, to never feel pain or hurt or anything. All of those things are part of life. So here's what excellence is not. It's not about position, status, or being rich or poor, popular or not. You can be at high levels, low levels. It's just about the way you live your life and how you want to make an impact on others. It's not about being perfect, being the best, and never making mistakes. We all do, by the way. No matter how good you are at what you do, how perfect you are as a person, there's always somebody better. And let's face it, we're all flawed. I mean, we have so much to learn in life. That's what, for me, makes what I get to do in teaching so much fun, is I'm probably learning more than those that I get to teach. There's so much to learn about leadership and people skills and team skills and so on, how to communicate with people. So it's not about being perfect, but it is about constantly learning and growing. It's not about not hurting, feeling pain, wanting to give up, experiencing grief and sorrow, struggling through down times, defeat and betrayal. The fact is, all of these things are part of life. And people committed to excellence do hurt. They do feel sorrow. They do have setbacks. When you see somebody committed to excellence and you think it's probably because just everything's going well in their life, may actually be quite the opposite. They just know how to rise above things. So this is not really what people think, that to be committed to excellence, you always got to be uplifting, to be around. We hope that would be the case, but you will have your down times and struggles and so on. Living life your way on your terms for your benefit. Wouldn't you say that's kind of the theme of today's society? Look out for number one, do your own thing, be your own person. You know, it's all about self. And the fact is that all the research about people that thrive and excel is it isn't about doing things their way on their terms for their benefit. It's about bringing out the best in others. Being self-confident, having a great self-image, and believing in yourself. If you do, by the way, you're fortunate. If you don't, you can still commit to excellence. Now, this is really interesting because we think of people committed to excellence as having this great self-confidence, these wonderful images and all that sort of thing. And that's actually not necessarily the case. In fact, you can be way too self-confident. It was an interesting study that was done by, or an article written by Walter Williams, who's one of my favorite economists. And guess what he found out? That in the United States, people were the most self-confident in the world, especially the youth and school-age kids that they surveyed. They thought literally they were the best at about everything, math, science, or whatever. In reality, they actually were dropping in these rankings year by year until now on most factors like math, science, and so on. Our youth are pretty close to the 18, 19, 20 rankings. In other words, we're going down, not up, as we're trying to make everybody self-confident kind of people. Now, go to the next slide. What committing to excellence is. Living life with a sense of purpose and wanting to make a difference. So that's what it's all about, that you want to make your life count. And you want to have a sense of purpose in life, and it may change over time, but you live with this sense of wanting to make a difference. It's a way of thinking and acting regarding how you want to live your life. So there's a thinking part of it, getting the right attitude and perspective, and then there's an acting part. It's an attitude about how you approach all aspects of life. Some of you have probably seen this, but one of my favorite quotes about attitude is by Charles Swindoll. And here's what he says: the longer I live, the more I realize the impact of attitude on life. Attitude to me is more important than facts. It is more important than the past, than education, than money, than circumstances, than failures, than successes, than appearance, giftedness, or skill. It will make or break a company, a team, a church, a home. The remarkable thing is we have a choice every day regarding the attitude we will embrace for that day. We cannot change our past. We cannot change the fact that people will act in a certain way. We cannot change the inevitable. The only thing we can do is play on the one string we have, and that is our attitude. I am convinced that life is 10% what happens to me and 90% how I react to it. And so it is with you. We are in charge of our attitude. It's a commitment to being a positive and uplifting influence on others. The way you think determines the way you act. And if you're committed to bringing out the best in others, which is a key to being a good leader, by the way, and probably a good person, you will find ways to be positive and uplifting on others. And it may just be smiling. It may be giving them a word of encouragement. It might be sending them an email that congratulates them for something that they did. It could be many things, but committing to excellence means that you're thinking about others all the time and looking for ways to have a positive influence on them. Now, here's another one that's really important: being down but not out. I came up with that term because people committed to excellence do get discouraged. They do get overwhelmed at times. They probably overcommit. They do have struggles, and they do experience sorrow and unfairness and so on. But they tend to have an attitude that helps them work their way out of it step by step. I wanted to give you an example that really moved me. Some of you may have watched the television show called America's Got Talent. And in this year's episodes, they had a singer who was very frail, but radiant. And before she started to sing, there just seemed to be something very special about her. She was very joyful and so on. And so the judges started asking her questions. For one thing, she had no hair, which seemed a little bit unusual. And it turns out, as she shared what was going on in her life, her short hair was from chemo treatment for terminal cancer. She had cancer in the lungs, spine, and liver, was diagnosed with a 2% chance of survival and probably not that many months to live. Her name, by the way, was Jane, or is Jane Marjewski, and her singing name, she goes by the name Nightbird. Nightbirds are birds that sing in the night when all is dark. The song that she sang, she also wrote, and believe it or not, it was titled, It's Okay. When asked how she could be so positive in such a difficult time, here's what she said: you can't wait until life isn't hard to be happy. And 2% odds of survival are better than 0%. Well, also committing to excellence is a resolve to making the best out of life, given the realities and circumstances you experience and circumstances you face. It's not about everything in your life going well, but it's how you approach them that really matters. Are you going to choose to still have an impact and make a difference, or are you going to choose to be a victim? And then finally, it's taking time to live a quality life and have quality relationships. In other words, people committed to excellence live their life in a way when, yes, they're productive, but their life isn't all about work. It's about having and taking the time to build quality relationships. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So now, what can you do to actually develop a plan to be able to begin to live a life committed to excellence? So the first thing that you really have to do is to define what for you it means to live a life committed to excellence. You can't live something that you don't really understand. So if for a moment, Sammy, you'd go to the next slide, and then I'll go back to this one. Go to the next slide, and you see one definition of excellence. This is one that I use in my classes, and those of you that have been students will recognize this. So this is one definition. Committing to excellence is an ongoing process of being willing to give up your excuses, be your best, and give your best, regardless of circumstances. So one idea about excellence is, first, you can't be an excuse maker if you're going to live a life of excellence. You've got to give up your excuses. And by the way, I realize a lot of our excuses are very valid. I think I may have even said in the last webinar, for me personally, I only use high quality excuses. I mean, my excuses are so convincing to me, to others, and so on, but they never change anything. Excuses are literally the cancer to change. You'll never change anything that you can make someone or something else responsible for or blame someone else for. So you really have to give up your excuses. Then you have to commit to being your best and giving your best. Now, this is really critical, because notice I didn't say be the best at anything. It isn't about being the best. There'll always be somebody better, by the way, but it's about committing, given whatever your realities are, your strengths, your weaknesses, within that context, you're committing to being the best that you can be and to giving the best that you can be in your professional life, your personal life, the way you think, the way you talk, the way you act. You're going to give it your best shot. And it's not going to be contingent on circumstances. If your life is contingent on circumstances, it'll be very difficult to commit to excellence, because your life will go up or down depending on the breaks of the day. So you also see, by the way, some levels that you can commit to. You're thinking about this whole thing, say, I really don't want to live a life of excellence. I just want to live life my way on my terms. You could, by the way, commit to excellence in just one thing. And actually, a lot of people are quite successful just doing that. You could also commit to excellence in several areas, or just all areas. It just becomes a way of life. That's what I'm hoping that you'll pick up in this webinar. I think the ultimate, by the way, is when you not only commit to being your best and giving your best, but to bringing out the best in others. That to me is the highest level of committing to excellence. Now, if you will go back to the previous slide about developing the plan, go back to that. Ah, yes. So the second thing is to have a mission statement. I don't know if you ever thought about writing yourself a mission statement, but it's really a worthy thing to do. I'll give you a quick example. Some of you may recognize the name Scott Oakey. Scott Oakey actually was one of our students in the College of Business, and he was an enlisted person who started taking courses out at UCCS and ended up getting his bachelor's and I believe his MBA as well. He got out of the service, went to work for a company that was then called Luart Press. Now I believe it's called Current. And he did quite well. And then one day he got a call. And he was becoming quite good at marketing. And this person said, would you like to come to my startup company and take a risk to see what you could do? The person, by the way, as I understand this story, was Bill Gates, the founder of Microsoft. Scott Oakey became an executive in Microsoft and made a fortune, retired, and then wasn't sure what to do with his life. And then one day, he came up with this idea of writing himself a mission statement. And by the way, if you think money will buy everything, I mean, he had all the money he could possibly want. He could spend his life playing golf, doing whatever he wanted, but that wasn't very satisfying. People committed to excellence want more out of life than just making life pleasant and fun for them. So he came up with this mission statement, and I'll read it verbatim. And he told me this, by the way, in an interview with him: to marry my passion for things entrepreneurial with things philanthropic in ways that encourage others to do the same. This now gave him a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning in life, and he has since helped many, many others do well in building new businesses. The next thing you need to do is to identify what your core values are that you want to live by. And by the way, you're running upstream to do this. We're in an age that's pretty much gotten rid of values. It's just a do your own thing, live life your way, on your terms kind of culture that we live in. But you need to have very clear core values. This is true, by the way, of organizations. It's true individually. An example I want to give you is from another interview that I had, and this one was with Alan Mulally, who was the former CEO of Ford. At the time, when in the 2006 to about the 2000, I think it was maybe 10 range, when the automobile industry was going under, they were bailing, the government was bailing everybody out. He wouldn't take a bailout. He decided to turn Ford around, and he instilled in Ford from top to bottom some very clear values. But in asking him about his own values, a lot of them came from some things that his mother taught him when he was growing up. And I thought I would share those with you. And here's what they were. Number one, the purpose of life is to love and be loved. Now think of a CEO at his level, and that's what he's living by. Number two, to serve is to live. And number three, it is nice to be important, but more important to be nice. Well, the next thing you need to do is to list your priorities. Now, if you've been in my classes, you know that you had to do that. You had to identify what your ideal priorities were and your actual. And by the way, in most cases, there were pretty big disparities between the two. That the way you wanted to live your life with what was most important was not the way you in actuality live your life. You know, for example, at the top might be faith, family, things like that. if they even made the list on the actual priorities, they usually were quite low and they got replaced by work and other kind of things in life. So it's very important that you list what are your ideal priorities in life? What's number one? What's most important that you live for? And number two, and so on. And then it is important to consider what your actual priorities are. Then the next thing is to have a plan for managing stress and trials. Now, again, if you took my classes, you probably had a session on how to manage stress, time, and your life. And the idea was to think ahead. How am I going to manage the stress, the pressures, the trials, the setbacks, the difficulties I have in life, so that when they hit me, I'm not caught off guard? And so if you want to take my course or want to go back and review your notes, you can see what we said about that. And basically what I ask you to do is to create a plan so you could actually practice it and be prepared when those trials and difficulties hit you. One of the best examples, actually, I found on this was something I read on a poster at a university that I was consulting with. And it was about character and about how to handle trials. And it actually wasn't about a person, by the way, it was about bald eagles. Now, listen to this. The eagle is designed to reach its full potential through the disciplines that are required of it in adversity. Violent storms allow it to reach its highest flights. Scarcity of food forces it to develop its sharp eyesight, amazing speed, and accurate diving. Its lonely environment allows it to care for its mate and to skillfully train its young. We should each commit to achieving our potential by using every opportunity to develop character in our life. Most of history's great leaders were men and women of strong character that was crafted from not just success, but also from suffering, major failures, crises, disappointments in their personal and professional lives. So we need to have a plan for managing stress and trials. The next one is to write out a little plan for what your legacy would be in an ideal sense. And again, if you took my classes, you probably had to do this as well. Unfortunately, one of my students mistook that, and he thought he was supposed to write his obituary. Well, I'm not asking you to do that, but I want you to think ahead about your legacy. What would you want your legacy to be so that you can start making it happen now? And then finally, another alternative is to manage life from a whole person perspective. And I'm going to show you something about that in just a second. But what I want to say about this list is you may not want to do all of these things, but you might want to do some of them. The key is that you do something that alerts you to every day making that choice about how you want to live your life and about committing to a life of excellence. So if you will go to the next slide, Sammy, there is, and go to the next one after that. And there is a little model in there about internal and external balance, and it's a whole person way to live your life. In other words, you think about what I want to be like emotionally, physically, and spiritually. That's the internal balance, and mentally, by the way, having a right attitude, right thinking, and so on. And then external balance, the things in your life that you have to pay attention to, like family, work, play, finances, and so on. So that's a whole person approach to living life. Now, go to the next slide. And there are a couple of things that I want you to remember about committing to living a life of excellence. One is what I call the behavioral chain reaction. And this is a little model that I put together that I found out later after I already published it in a book. Some of this kind of thinking had actually been around for centuries. So I think it's something that I didn't necessarily create it. I think it's just been a way of thinking for many years. But this helps you understand how you live your life. The way you think determines the way you act. Actions that are practiced become habits. Our habits shape our character as a whole person, mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. And our character begins to shape our destiny. So it all starts with the way we think. The knowledge we have, the beliefs we have, the values we have, our attitude, all of these things begin to drive the way that we act. And by the way, our thinking can be correct, it can be incorrect, but whatever it is, it's driving the actions. So it's very important to consider what we fill our mind with, because it's going to determine the way we act. And whatever we are practicing is likely to become a habit. You want to know how you get the way you are? We can say many things about that, but basically it's based on what you're practicing that becomes a habit, and that shapes the character and destiny. Now, I want to emphasize these first three things, because if you're going to start to live a life committed to excellence, you're going to have to think different, act different, and that will begin to drive new habits. I wanted to read something about habits from an article written by George Leonard, and it says, true mastery isn't a matter of attending weekend seminars, getting a promotion, or becoming a bit better at what you do. Whether you want to be a skilled pianist, a more effective manager, or a more loving spouse and parent, the secret is a lifelong commitment to practice, practice, practice. Once you view mastery as a journey and acknowledge that the trip may be difficult and slow at times, you'll have the stamina and good sense to go beyond the setbacks and emerge along the way. Throughout history, most people assume that life's superstars were gifted people, that they were born with talents that could not be developed. But more recent research, and he cited some published in the American Psychologist, said that you can actually develop habits and behaviors that perhaps you thought were only for gifted people. And he uses the example, by the way, of small children. And he uses the example of the idea of having perfect pitch. I don't know if any of you out there have perfect pitch, where we can call out an A and you get in an A, a C, a C. But what they found out with these little kids, well, only 1 in 10,000 persons tends to have perfect pitch. The fact is, they could actually teach these kids perfect pitch through practice and developing new habits. And then, by the way, the second thing is, I want you to see these 4 keys to continuous growth, change, and commitment to excellence. And if you go to the next slide, the first one is owning responsibility for your behavior. And that is so key to this whole discussion. If you will own responsibility for your behavior, regardless how you got the way you are, why you do what you do, or whose fault it is, you are then in a position to begin to shape a lot of your own behavior. And even those things that you're not in control of that happen to you, you can begin to choose how you respond. So this is a whole different way of thinking than we seem to be teaching people in our society today, where everything that you do that's wrong is someone or something else's fault. Now we're saying, if we can just get people to own responsibility for their behavior, they can change their people skills, their team skills. If they're open to feedback, they can fill in a lot of the blind spots. It just changes everything about the way that you approach life. The easy road to life is to always excuse your behavior, rationalize it, justify it, or whatever. I don't utilize my gifts and potential because I have a bad attitude in life, because I know that I'm temperamental, but that's just because of the way I am. I know I have a bad temper, but I was born that way. As long as you make someone or something else responsible for your behavior, you'll be a victim in life. The next one is self-awareness. And you can't change something that you're not aware of. So here's what we found out about self-awareness. It requires for someone to be fairly self less, to be open to feedback about your own behavior so that you can be aware. So self-awareness is critical to change, to being your best, to living a life committed to excellence. Teachability. This is really a critical one. How teachable are you? Are you one of these persons that actually welcomes feedback, that loves to listen more than you talk and learn from others everything that you can? That frequently, when you're in conversations with people, you immediately probe and see what you can learn from them, from what you can do to grow. Well, here's what we found out about teachability. It has a whole lot to do with humility. If you're not humble, you're really not going to be that interested in being teachable. And it also has a lot to do with creating a safe psychological environment for people to be truthful and candid with you. So how teachable are you? And then finally, this whole ability to bounce back, when things go wrong, and they will. One of the persons I think about in this regard is actually Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln probably was the greatest president we ever had, certainly one of the best. Did you know that he had less than 1 year of formal schooling? His mother died when he was 9. At 22, he went bankrupt. At 25, he went bankrupt again, got defeated in an election, got rejected in marriage. It was a bad year. At 36, he proposed again and got rejected. He finally did get married, but he lost 2 sons. Between ages 41 and 48, he lost 3 more elections. And at age 61, he became the president of the United States. Now, go to the last slide. So here's the question. Are you willing to commit to personal excellence? Are you willing to get up every day and start the day by saying, or asking the question, am I willing to commit to excellence in the way I think? That would be my attitude, the way I speak, how I say things to others, and the way that I act, in the way that I behave. If you are willing to commit to excellence, I can assure you it will begin to change your life and the lives of many others that you come in contact with. And it will give you an opportunity in life to live life with a purpose and be a source of light to others in a very dark world. So I thank you so much for attending this webinar. As I said at the beginning, to me, it's the most important of all the webinars that we will be doing. And now we'll use the last minutes for questions. So Sammy, I don't know if you're out there and collecting questions that can be asked. All I can see is the screen.
And I think if anyone has questions, you can either raise your hand. I think you can come off mute on the chat, as it looks like it won't be too busy. Any thoughts or comments for Dr. Warrick? Time. I'm not seeing anything.
Were there any questions written on chat?
I just see lots of thank yous.
Well, if there are no questions, maybe I'll end it with a few quotes.
Yeah, that would be great. So I am seeing a few things pop up.
Okay.
One of the questions was, so will the deck be available? So we'll be, I think the slide deck was in the initial email. We'll make sure that's available also in the follow-up email. Any book recommendations, Dr. Warrick?
Oh boy, that's a tough one. I mean, there are so many books out there about learning to think on a more positive way. There's a whole field developing called positive psychology, positive organization behavior, that even some of the resilience literature starts to kind of fit this whole life of committing to excellence. But to tell you the truth, I haven't really seen a lot. That's why I put this together, that really makes it a lifestyle, a way of living, a way of thinking, speaking, acting. So what I would encourage you to do is to get this webinar. As Alyssa said, actually, you can access it. So you can have the whole thing, go back and listen to it again. But remember, it's all about that question at the end, because if you start thinking that way, you'll start acting that way.
I have another question from Frank Kinder, which says, do you know any personal stories of people who have followed this commitment path and transformed their lives from chaos or partial to success to greater levels of achievement and impact? So
yes, well, by the way, there are many sitting out in this audience. I'm looking at the names, and I mentioned two, my wife Anna, and certainly Sandy Kramer. But do you know that in my classes, every semester that I've had for the last 50 years, I have seen students, because of the papers they write, who have gone from being a victim to committing their life to excellence. And I've seen the change in their life. I've seen the change in the impact they have on people. I can tell you, we have many faculty and staff members. I saw Dustin Bloom's name show up, who's by the way, my department chair. There's a person committed to excellence. Staff members, especially in the College of Business, we have so many that just have this strong commitment to excellence. I see two of them with Samantha and Alyssa. There are people out there, and they're fun to be around. But the fact is that if you and I don't think about it, we don't tend to act that way. We might even feel it, but now it has to be practiced to have an impact on others.
Thanks, Don. And I'm going to share, I think, maybe one more question and then some final comments. So I have a question from Kendall Godley. Forgive me, everyone.
And this is Sandy Kramer, and I have a comment.
Okay, Sandy, do you want to go ahead?
Well, I'll tell a story about Don.
Okay.
Probably maybe 35 years ago, I was managing the manager of our law office, and my wife Dorothy took a course from Don, and she had a little 3-ring notebook that was the text for the class, and Dorothy said, "Why don't you read this?" And so I read this, and I went to the office and applied the principles that Don had in this little 3-ring notebook, and it very greatly helped my management of our law firm. So Don, there's a new story for you.
Wow. Well, Sandy, you've been an inspiration to me and my wife, Anna.
Thanks, Sandy.
Well, we'll talk one more, because are you still there?
I'm still here.
Okay, let's get together and have lunch, because I am trying to crank up storytelling through the library. And you might have some ideas on how to instill some storytelling projects at the UCCS library.
Great. And Sandy, by the way, has written a number of books.
Well, so one final question, and I'm just going to put in a plug here real fast before this final question, because I know some folks might need to depart as we're getting towards 1 o'clock. But thank you all for attending. And if this is programming that you've enjoyed and something that you want to see continued, we really encourage you to visit the Warrick 50 website. And as Don mentioned at the beginning of this, we do have created an endowment to support all these efforts and Don's legacy. And we ask that you consider visiting that page and making a gift to support Don's endowment for excellence in teaching, leadership, and culture. So I'll put that link in the chat. But one final question that I have from Kendall, and that question was, do you have any suggestions for people just starting work in large organizations, particularly large organizations with established culture, because they've been operating for 100+ years? And he said that he's asking that question.
Yeah,
regarding
yeah, I've written a lot about culture. And I think one of the things I'm learning is that you and I, no matter what level we are at, can affect culture. We may not be able to affect the culture of a whole organization, but we're affecting the culture of the people around us. We're affecting the culture in our personal life, especially if we have a family. And so I think when people have this attitude of committing to excellence, they start to impact people. The fact that they care about others, they're trying to bring out the best in others, they have a positive, uplifting attitude, it affects the culture around them. And every once in a while, if you rise to a high level, you can affect the culture of a whole organization.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone. I think that closes out all the questions, and I know we're right at 1 o'clock. So thank you again all for attending. There will be a follow-up email with the slides and the recording, and an opportunity to share your feedback. This has been a great event, and we'll look to hold more of these Warrick webinars as long as everyone is joining. So we really appreciate it. So thank you to Dawn. Thank you to the crew setting this up, and thank you all for attending. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you to everybody who attended.
Thank you.
Yeah.